Hello and welcome to another episode. This week we are starting our first episodic bit of content called Fully Supported, which will be a series of tutorial lessons teaching how I support each type of size of a particular part or model, all being, from miniature, terrain pieces, large figures, individual parts, and then even other type of odd parts, not even, figurines, could be masks, designer stuff, cosplay stuff. We'll get into all of that eventually. It's going to get there. These videos will not be sped up in any way, unlike a lot of my earlier videos where I will, would cut through some of the stuff or speed it up with some music. This is going to be fully me talking for nearly 40 plus minutes. So if you don't like the sound of my voice, you should probably just check out now. But hey, I like the sound of my voice. Anyway, we don't skip on much except for maybe like a couple island checks, which I will do off edit, and just because they take a while, and honestly, that just takes up unnecessary time you folks don't need to waste. This particular model we're going to be supporting today is from Gaz Minis and is the Aquamarine Bolter. We sell this one in 8 varieties. And this just happens to be one of them. We're going to go through the model slice by slice, layer by layer, and this video, yes, like I said before, is a bit long. So if you want to skip ahead to the end and see what the supported model looks like, I will not be offended. All right, what we'll do first is we're going to go from the bottom up, and we're going to work our way around the island's yellow zones. Those are the overhangs and other areas that do need more supporting usually, because they're going to be the ones under the most strain, the most pull. The yellow zones in Lychee indicate an area that really is just, we recommend supporting it. That's essentially, the program should just tell you that, but I guess in common sense language, they figure yellow means caution and just, add support here. As far as the character's orientation and rafting, which I didn't really go over, I already had that set up in the beginning. Character figures like this minis usually stand up straight up. You can lean them back a little tiny bit, maybe 10 to 15 degrees. Any further back, you're going to create more of a larger section of pull between each layer in some spots. And honestly, you're going to make a big flat character. You're going to lay them down. They're going to turn into a post. And then you're going to have to put supports all along their back. This way, you put all the supports on their feet. And then you wind up just supporting their islands as they kind of grow up. This is usually pretty simple, and you can go through it like I'm going through here, just layer by layer, just dragging that layer slider up and just covering each area of the model as you build up. Now, I didn't go over rafts either, but that's also another section there on your prepare tab. You can see there on the left you have rafts, you have visibility, you have a bunch of other tools. Hollowing, this character is not big enough to hollow. Rafts are fine. You can use a raft. You don't necessarily have to use a raft. As long as the supports combine together and you create a nice enough surface area on the build plate, usually should be enough to make good contact. But if you want to use a raft, I recommend the line triangle or line raft. It uses the least amount of resin and it does make good contact. It's a great one. I use it for 90% of my prints. All right, so as we cut into this, and you're watching me doing this support already, you're noticing that I'm doing these trees, these little fans and trees and stuff like that. There's a really cool trick to do that. You can actually use just Alt-Control to drag the initial mini from the model to the bar support. Then you're going to hold Alt and Shift, and then you can duplicate that mini while moving your mouse around, and you can continue to add them while holding Alt and Shift, and that will continue to allow you to create more fan bits as you are spreading around the supports. And because this is a miniature, you really want to use as many minis as possible. You want to be mindful of the size of the tip, how much it might be protruding or going outside of the lines of the mesh. And some of my little bits there on the bottom are, but those are on the feet, and I don't really care about the feet too much. If you care about the feet, and that's something you want to focus more, like you want to move all those around and make sure not a single one is going to possibly damage the bottom of the character's feet, fine, then you can move those around. I don't usually take the time to do it on their feet, only because of the fact that it's their feet. Usually this is the part that's going to contact a base. You're going to glue that down, and no one's going to see the bottom of these characters' feet. So I don't think you should really focus too much time and energy on it personally, but that's just my own personal thing. If you want to spend more time focusing on that, you can. Again, focus on size. Look here in this little crack here. We can't really work very well, so we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we put a support in here? Well, I have a support bar that's just touching the back of that inside of the heel, and then I'm going to drag mini supports across to see if I can make some connections. They're still touching a little bit there on that upper piece, and I think they are actually going to, they might cause a proximity issue, but they might not, and it might be just enough for me to get in there with my X-Acto knife and clip it off once it's been printed. Again, these are the bottom of the model. I want to stress that the reason I don't lay them backwards is because the feet are the negligible part on these characters. Miniatures don't have a whole lot of real estate to put supports on, at least nothing of any kind of value. You don't have a lot of room to work with. These characters are small. So you've got to make use of the real estate you have, and you have to kind of like manipulate these supports in such a way that you're not going to damage too much of the important stuff, which is why I focus the heavier and less dainty support structures to the feet. Again, I don't care about the feet. In most cases, I have so much stuff going on the bases these things are going on to, you don't even see the feet. I mean, you can easily fix that too, because that's an easy fix. Again, these are very small support tips. They're only 0.22 millimeter. So if there is a little bit there that's residual, usually just flake it off with your fingernail and there's nothing even damaged. These are very light supports. But it's perfect for miniatures because you don't need the heavy structure really for miniatures, unless of course they've got bulky bits. And then you may want to consider, maybe bulking up some of your support a little bit. But yeah, so anyway, we're just working on this 1 foot for now. And as we work our way up, we're going to continue to work on the pieces of the model. And again, I'm going to go through almost every single detail here that I possibly can as we go through the supporting of this demonstration, because I wanted to make this as complete as possible so that way you folks can actually see a full demonstration of a support work. This is literally the way I do my work. So when I take a character, I bring it into Lychee. This is how I structure my supports. This is how I work. I work one layer at a time, pulling that slider up, going back to my workspace, adding the supports where I need them. In some cases, I'll go back and revise some. It's not always going to be perfect my first run. And I'm not always going to get a perfect print. But a good 90% of my prints do not, I have no problems with. So I've got a fairly good track record with my print and my testing. So once I support something, I'm usually pretty satisfied that I've got it. And that's mostly because of the fact that I'm doing this layer by layer. So it's really hard to miss things. I'll usually catch 99.9% of the islands on the first run. And then when I go up and I do my island check at the layer heights that I'm actually going to print at, I'll catch the rest of them. So again, it's all about going one little bit at a time. And as you see, as I'm climbing up on this model, we're just discovering one island at a time. Now, I've already done Lychee's island check at 20 microns because I'm crazy and I like to check islands at 20 microns. We've already gone over this. I did my episode where we talked about the different layer heights. If you're not familiar with that episode, you should check out my channel and all the videos. There's tons of stuff for you to learn. And if you're not subscribed, please do so. And don't forget to leave comments on the videos, guys. We love to hear more questions about what we do. Because, we're all about 3D printing. I do this stuff. I live, breathe, and eat it. Well, I don't eat it. That's not proper. Don't eat this stuff. It's not good for. It really hurts your teeth, I imagine, too. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, as we continue to move around the model, the supporting that I'm doing here, like I said, on the feet is going to be a little heavier. So you're going to notice more clustering here. There's going to be more supports that are closer together. We're going to have a little less care for what contact points we're doing, where the contact points are, because again, they're on the feet. We're going to be able to sand those down real easy, simple stuff, no problems. Again, with the mini supports, it's Alt and Control together from the contact on the model to the bar. And then if you want to use that duplicate trick, it's Alt and Shift to do the duplication. Alt and D will also do a duplicate bar that you can then link into the existing bar. This is another way of doing trees, and that will duplicate the bar, and then you can also just holding Alt and Shift while holding the bar, or well, sorry, while selecting the bar, holding Alt and Shift will then duplicate it as well, allowing you to create tree tips for the bar. I'm not really doing that much on this mini. That's more of a technique I'd use for bigger parts because this doesn't really need full-on fans like that. Um, so I'm just focusing on the minis and the smallest light supports that I'm using. And if you can't see the settings up there I've got in my support window, they will be in the description of the video. All of my support settings for Lychee are in every single episode. I always make sure we share them because I feel it's important to share. All right, we're just going to continue working our way up. And again, just hitting every island and sometimes double hitting them, just in parts where I think it might need a little extra help. Now again, we talked about the yellow zones. You're going to notice yellow on any part of the model that's going to be either parallel to the plate, meaning it's like right there, like a straight up shelf, or anything that just generally needs a little extra support, like I said. So keep an eye out for the yellow zones. They are going to help you indicate where you need to add most of your supporting. And you will definitely see that in this demonstration as we continue. So of course, as we increase the amount of the model as we go up, we're increasing the surface area. So one of the things you'll notice is that we will increase the number of supports moving up into the model. But you will notice I will vary the tip size here and there because depending on the contact point, I really want to preserve the detail. So like these little bits here that are hanging down that are kind of like fins on this character, we're going to minimize these tips a little bit and just change the bar just a teeny weeny bit because it's a delicate bit. It's just a delicate little overhang island. So we need to make sure that we're delicate with how we support it. And I'm going to use these slightly lighter tips to kind of manage some of the supports as we move up the leg. Because unlike the foot, I care about the leg and I don't want to damage it. This is detail. So you definitely want to make sure that this is where you start really paying attention. Now again, you can fluctuate the tip size and the bar size and the tip length. And there's no such thing as too heavy, really. I mean, yeah, sure, it's going to be much harder for you to clip off, and the tip is going to be ridiculous. So, prepare to sand. But as long as your model succeeds to print and you get a successful print, you don't have a failure, I'd say that that's a step in the right direction. Don't be too, disappointed if your first print comes out over-supported. This is common. We will always be overly cautious with the first couple times we do this. It's just the nature of this kind of thing. So don't be too upset if you spend 40 minutes just trying to clip the supports off and you're being really careful and then you break off a piece. And it's discouraging all around because, you're just, I'm new to this stinks. Don't blow it off. Try again. Give it another look. See where you might have added too much. And then kind of pull away respectfully. Make adjustments. See where you could have done a little less. Things like that. By the way, the advanced editor there, if you want to access that, you just tap the space bar, and that allows you to manipulate the bits of the support individually, including the joints. So yeah, you can. That's a good trick if you want to get really specific with how you're supporting particular bars, like if you want to move them around so the structure looks a particular way. Some folks really care about the look of their supporting designs. I'm not too particular. I mean, mine sometimes look jumbled or a little messy here and there. But for the most part on miniatures, they usually look fairly structured and neat because the miniatures require you to kind of like take this, gentle care with them, and so you kind of really respectfully have to go a little bit at a time, and you wind up making these really nice looking support structures. The way to get in there and really do that though is of course to like I just showed you the advanced using the space bar. You simply click on the support you want to use or manipulate, you tap the space bar, and that'll bring up that advanced manipulation tool that allows you to move the different parts of the support. Now notice here on the yellow zones, I'm adding a lot of little supports there. These are 0.22 tips, so they're decently sized, but it's not too many clustered close together. So at the very most, you're going to have a couple little bits there that might stick out of her butt, and you'll have to sand those off. Not going to be a really big deal. Again, notice I'm using the mini supports where I see little fine details, because I definitely don't want to damage anything that's fine, any fine lines, any fine details, stuff like that. And that will help me support my islands and not add any additional damage to the model. So all right, let's move right along, and we'll work our way up to about the middle of the model here. Now, I really feel like at the end of the day, I'm hoping that watching this video will give you folks a good workflow method that you can use. Um, Maybe you're not going to grasp this all the first time, and yes, I know it's a lot of information to digest. I may not be as thorough as I think I'm being thorough. So if there's anything you would like to see added to another tutorial of this type, please leave the comments, and I will read them, I promise. I read all of them. Anyway, we're gonna just add a couple more minis up here just to give this extra these yellow zones the little tender care that they need. And then I'm going to demonstrate some of that contact point stuff I was talking about earlier. So when we adjust the tips sometimes, it's usually because we want it to form well or contact well to a particular part of the model. Like here, for example, this is a sticky one. This island is real close, and there's one right above it. So we can use the model, we can anchor one support to the bottom island, but the tip I'm using, the 0.22, is a little bit too thick. So what we'll wind up doing is placing a support there, and then more than likely adjusting it, because again, the support's too thick. We can also do this, where we add a mini to the other support below it, and then we can fan that down like that. That gives you less contact on the actual model parts. And again, this is going to happen fairly frequently as you go up and down the detail. You're just going to have to find the places that you are okay with finishing later, because you're going to have a little bit of detail that's going to get, some support bits stuck to it. It does happen, regardless of how careful you try to be. You can also make the tips thinner than the bases, as I just did there for those minis, by the way, by adjusting the top tip diameter, not the bottom one. That will allow you to make little cones, which should have better contact bottom, but a thinner contact point at the top. And this will allow you to create less damage. Again, the focus is really trying to support the model so it succeeds. Create the least amount of support damage on the upper areas of the model. And to ensure that the supports are also equally easy to remove. One of the most annoying things about some miniature pre-supports is that you have to be very delicate with them. Otherwise, you're going to break something. A lot of cases, swords, heavy weapons like spears and axes, long items that tend to stick out will often snap off. Now, you have less of a chance of this happening if you have a better resin, because it will help. But there's still this chance that you're going to run into an issue there. So I try to keep my supporting in a medium zone where it's supported well, it's good enough that it's going to succeed, and it's not going to take you a decade to break the supports out, and you may not even have to use clippers, because in a lot of cases they'll just come right off. You don't have to worry too much about breaking stuff. So this is, again, I hope this is a viable method and teaches you folks how to legitimately go and support your own miniatures. Because at the end of the day, we all, we want to be able to do this for ourselves. We don't need to rely on other people. So hopefully this gets you one step closer. All right, one of the things I do want you to pay a lot of attention to is how much I'm utilizing miniature supports. Also notice when I'm contacting certain parts of the model, I will change the tip diameters on the top. I will change occasionally the bar diameters. All of this is again just to protect quality of the model. It is very important to note as you kind of adjust things that you need to be aware of where you put your lighter stuff. So, you need to go, okay, well, I put the really light supports here, only on this particular light area. Um, and you have to be mindful and remember to make the supporting logical. If you're creating fans, try to create them in neat arcs, try to make everything structured together, try to make them symmetrical so both sides are even, or as even as you can. Sometimes the spacing doesn't have to be perfect, but I mean, just make it look formed, like there's some sort of formation going. This will help a lot and make sure that then this will help maintain the structure is good, and that way you will have less failures in your supporting. Now, again, not every support build is going to be perfect. Sometimes it's going to be over supported. Sometimes you're going to have pancaking, under supporting issues. Sometimes you're going to have complete failures where it's just not going to make it through the process. Um, and again, these are all things that will dissuade you from continuing on this illustrious hobby of 3D printing. But I plead with you, do not give up on one failure. Do not give up on, an over-supported model. Don't kick yourself about it too much. You're going to learn with each process, with each model you mess with each piece, with each part, with each terrain, however you're working, whatever you're working on, is going to teach you something else. And I guarantee that eventually, if you continue to push that, you will learn how to deal with all these issues. It can be daunting, and I don't have a lot of respect for folks who say that 3D printing is easy. There's nothing easy about it. Sure, you can throw your model into a slicer and hit the auto button. Hope for the best. And maybe in some cases it will print out. In a lot of cases, it won't. And the auto supporting features aren't getting that much better. A couple programs are promising things that are a little bit more promising than others. But as of right now, I don't trust Lychee to auto support my models. And I wouldn't expect you to either. I wouldn't trust Chi2Box to do it as well. And honestly, out of all the other softwares I've used, I think I'd only trust one that's actually worked for me in the past. And that's Tango. And I don't use that one that much. But we're actually planning on doing a video series about Tango soon that's going to compare some of its features, including the auto support function. And I think once you guys see it, you're going to probably want to give it a try yourselves. It's pretty darn cool. I was fairly impressed with it the first time we messed with it. And although it wasn't perfect, I think the new iterations that they've created with their software have probably done a lot to fix it. Because the most recent demonstration that I was working on came out quite good with their auto support function. So pretty cool to think that we might actually have an application that can really auto support something, and reliably too. Like something you're not going to have to worry about that might actually, fail. I mean, no one wants to clean that up. So here I want you to take note as we're working on the gun part. This is an island in itself, and it's a pretty decently sized one. So I'm going to support the bottom of that magazine that's popping out of the gun pretty tight with a bunch of minis, and I'm even going to throw a bracing up on these. Now the way to do a bracing is you're going to select more than one support at the same time, and then you're going to go over to the manual part of the supporting tab, and you're going to click on bracings. That will connect a bunch of little scaffoldings between the two bracings, making them a heck of a lot stronger. So it'll work out for stuff like this. And because these support rods are getting kind of tall, and they're also kind of thin, I want to make sure that they can withstand any kind of sway or wobble that might happen, because occasionally your supports will wiggle a little bit just due to the nature of them popping off of the FEP, and then all of a sudden you got some malformed supports, or they miss their mark entirely. Now, that usually won't happen unless you've got a Z wobble, which means you probably need to apply some more lubricant to your printer elevator. But it can happen just from fluid dynamics. As I said, as the build plate pops up, sometimes these little stringy supports will wiggle a little tiny bit, and when they come back down, they're not exactly in the same place when they touch the FEP again because the lift off and come back down is so short. So again, this could be an issue. You have to keep this kind of stuff in mind. So watch out for that, and always make sure to add a couple bracings on really thin supports when you're working at higher heights. So as we're getting up the model here, this is a couple more millimeters off the plate. You want to probably add a bracing or two there to make sure that that doesn't wobble. Again, we have to be really mindful of the detailed areas. We have to be careful not to over saturate supports in any one particular spot. I have to be mindful of how the bars all kind of collide with each other. But for the most part, if you're manually placing, they usually will kind of, place in good structure. As long as you're not clustering them too close together, especially on something like this, like a little miniature where it's real easy to cluster them up and you're just like, oops, too many. But when you're working on bigger pieces, the clustering is a little bit, it's almost impossible sometimes unless you're just going crazy. And I've seen some stuff that's massively over supported, and even in my beginning early days, used to over support things quite a lot. But in my journey to reduce the amount of time sanding, um, I've come up with better and smarter ways to do it. And honestly, just using mini structures, using the bar structure, using bracing structures where needed, and following the slice by slice routine that I'm showing you here, and just going one layer at a time. Yes, it will take you a little longer to support your model than clicking the auto support button. Yes, it will be a pain in the butt sometimes, and you probably won't want to bother doing it. But I promise you, you're going to get better prints and you're going to get better results than if you do this instead of relying on pre-support files and auto supports. Now, if you're a fan of Chitubox and you think their auto support feature is awesome, great, I'm happy for you. Personally, it never worked for me. Tried it on numerous models, never had any success with it. The only successes I have had were massively over supported, and it was really hard for me. The island checks were a pain. I had to use UV tools, which I don't really care for too much. I actually prefer to just use Lychee's island check and then just do it by hand. To be honest, those kind of tools they don't work for me too much. So for me, I never had much success with it. I used Photon Slicer a few times. That's the software that comes with a lot of the Anycubic printers that we use. It's terrible. I mean, I've never used the Pro version because I never got into it that deep, and honestly, I just didn't want to. It just wasn't that intuitive of a piece of software. Um, they say they have a new version of it now. It's been re-interfaced and all that. I haven't messed with it since. But regardless, Lychee has been one of the best tools that I have ever found in this type of work. And, so far, it's holding the top spot in my library. But again, I do use other software from time to time. I have used Chitubox to do some stuff for clients where they request it. And I have used Tango from Voxel Dance as well. And Tango Slicer is an interesting slicer. It's got a lot of features to it. And like I said before, we're going to do some episodes on that too. That is actually something I'm planning on because I want to showcase other slicers other than just Lychee. I do like Lychee and its features, and it's very intuitive. It works really well. It's good. It's good for advanced and beginners alike. However, I don't think it's the only one out there that can do the job. And so we're going to kind of explore that a little bit over the next couple of weeks, months, etc., and see how we feel about Tango. In the meanwhile here, you see I'm having a really tough time with that little island in there and having to finagle a little point and then another point kind of connected to it. But you see how tucked in that is. Sometimes islands will really be tucked into an area, and they're just really hard to support that way. They kind of get nestled almost, where you have to kind of dig your supports around it, and then you have to attach mini bars that are going to come along and connect to it. So that way you have, a good connection, but you're not causing any, clustering or, too much supporting in a particular zone. Like here, look at this piece on the chest. There's that support down there. I'm going to have to use a mini bar connected like that to kind of give it, and that's a parallel bar. So I'm going to create a couple of them to give this little added strength, because I worry that that one might not work too well. It's kind of at a rough angle. So we'll see. I don't always like doing things at rough angles like that. But, I mean, if you have to stick the supports there, sometimes you can just put a few extra ones. See, like that doesn't look right. Again, here I'm trying to do some treeing, but there's not a lot of room for the supports to work. So I don't have a lot of room for that to work. So I'm probably just going to resort to mini supports here, because I don't like that. It's going to look, yeah, that just looks weird. No, we'll just go with mini supports. Just, yeah, that doesn't look right. Like I said, sometimes you don't have a lot of space. See, that's colliding. So, again, sometimes it just makes the most sense to use mini supports. And that's what we'll do in this particular case. All right, folks, hang in there. We are almost done. This is about more than halfway through this miniature, and we are just about finished supporting it. As you can see, most of the support is really going on the islanding areas, and then some added supportings around them. The reason that it's a good idea when you're working on miniatures to work your way up like this is because you can kind of see where the weight is going to be on that particular model. If it's going to be on like an arm, like if they have like their arms hanging out, a lot of weight's going to be applied to that. So make sure that you support those well enough. But don't support them too much to the point where you're going to snap their arm off when you go to remove the supports. So that's why you have to be cautious about how much supporting you use, where you place the bars, and how you use your mini tips. See, the fans that I'm going to create on the arm over here are going to demonstrate, this is usually how I would, support a extended limb would be with a couple of bars up from the bottom and then fans up at the top, usually just mini supports. And I'm going to do the same thing with the hand that's got the gun extended, because the gun kind of creates the same issue where that's a lot of shelving and islanding that's happening there. So the one that's in her hand, I need to make sure that that's supported well enough, but not blemish too much of the detail, because it's cool. It's a cool little bolter thing that she's got going on. So I don't want to ruin the detail on the gun. I want to make sure the lines on the magazine stay nice and crisp. I want to make sure you can see those little bolts and stuff like that. So that to me is important. And so when we start to work on little things like that, as we get to the higher up areas of the model, we've already got the strong root established with the feet. We've already worked on the islands all the way up to this point. Now we're really getting to the part that's high detail. We're getting to where the face is. We're getting to the stuff that they're holding in their hands. This is usually weapons and staves and stuff like that. So again, high detail in most cases. This is where you want to be the most attentive and just seriously use the most caution when it comes to placing your support tips, bars, and minis, and how you're going to structure that. Now, because the gun is kind of leaning backwards, it's not backwards, to the side a little bit there, I'm going to put the supports on the back side of it. I'm going to create a little fan here to support that area as that builds, and then I'm going to just kind of expand that up by adding another bar and then creating another fan and then adding another bar and then creating another fan. And we'll also go over to the other side of the model of the gun, and we'll add some more supporting on that side as well. So again, this will be as dainty as possible, but also ensuring that an area that is yellow area, definitely a lot of islands, is going to be supported well enough. This is, again, this is where you could have some pancaking issues if you under support this zone. Again, you might want to go, I'll just put barely enough. It'll be fine. It's a light little miniature. It might work. It might not. You might wind up with a pancaked gun, or just no gun at all, or no arm at all. So again, it's all part of trial and error when it comes to that sort of thing. If you want to try and preserve more detail and put less supporting, you can be daintier with it, but just be careful with that. You see now this is interesting. I'm going to create a little round fan around this because this is a little low point that comes down off the head, I believe, and this hangs out by itself for quite a bit before it joins back to the model. So I want to make sure this material is supported well enough that it maintains the shape. Because rounded objects like this, when they kind of just appear, will pancake the worst. And so yeah, you got to try and keep that stable and up. All right, so moving back over to the arm, we need to support this hand. We're going to use a series of smaller tips, regular sized, and then we're going to connect some minis to the fingers to protect those islands. When you're working with a limb on a mini, be careful. Some of their limbs can be really thin. I mean, this one isn't. It's not too bad, but if you over support this, you could definitely easily snap it off. This would be your breaking point probably on this model. So between the other arm with the weapon and then this arm that's just kind of extended, that's two big shelf overhang kind of areas that are on this model, which make it a little bit more challenging to support sometimes because you have to kind of find a fine balance between good supporting and not oversaturating the model with support tips because you don't want to wreck it. I mean, it's a small model. It's kind of hard and you get lost in this sometimes when you work with the software because you're working so close, the model feels huge. When you pop it off your build plate, you go, oh man, that's way smaller than than I remember. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, because you were zoomed into it for like an hour. And in some cases, you'll find yourself literally forgetting like how small these things actually are until you see them in your hand again. Again, if you see this proximity pop up on one of your supports, it means it's too close to the model. So go ahead and just use that advanced mode that I talked about before and adjust it, move it away from the model. The part that is in proximity error will actually be the part that's got that candy striper kind of like red thing going on. So yeah, that'll be your way to detect proximity problems. But we can also show you the proximity check as well, which will turn any support into that red kind of candy stripe um, texture that is in proximity error. And by proximity, essentially, it's something that the software thinks is a little too close and is going to cause fusing, meaning the support's going to fuse to the model. And you are not going to have a fun time getting any of that off. Fusing is a pain because if it does happen, if it's not a mini support, it's going to be like a whole side of a support or a bit of it, and it's going to be hard to repair that damage because usually it's something that gets fused to it. It just turns into a chunk. I always recommend running the proximity check in Lychee before you slice. It'll save your life. It's a real pain to have proximity issues. It really is. You don't want to deal with it. It can happen, you know, in the weirdest ways. Like you can just be placing the supports. It may not automatically detect it right away, and then, it's still in proximity error. So you go to print it, and that support fuses to the model, and then you wind up with really really bad bead detail damage usually. I mean, it just depends on where it is, but still, you want to try to avoid it. So again, use the proximity check, and we'll go over that at the end as well. Moving back to the other side of the weapon hand, we're going to continue to put the mini supports and bars on the areas just like I did on the other side. But again, we're not trying to be incredibly heavy here. We're just putting enough support to maintain the part. And then once it joins back into the model, because some of that's islanding, you have more support there because it's already got the support that's underneath it that's holding the rest of the model. So you only have to make sure that you give the island enough support, or the shelf or the overhang, enough support to get back to the model. I mean, and then of course, depending on the size or weight of the part, you can continue to add more to that, as in supporting, and that will continue to, of course, strengthen that ability to support that part. But then you also add additional material, which you're using resin. Then you also add additional detail damage or loss because you're adding more supports to a particular spot. So it's all about balance. And like I said before, guys, you're not going to get it right your first time. I mean, maybe you will. I didn't. It took me quite a few tries to really kind of master the idea of where to put these things, how to place the supports the best way possible, how to support different size parts. And honestly, it's not a perfect science either. I mean, you can have a model that will fully print and support and be just fine, and there you could randomly print it and have a fail. So, and that's not even your bad. It could just be, you know, resin issues, temperature issues, environmental issues. Could be an air bubbles. Again, I've actually had an air bubble ruin a print. There was one particular, actually two particular times where we had, I guess it was a little too warm. The resin got a little too thin. It makes more bubbles when that happens. And so unfortunately, there was a bubble that formed somewhere towards the middle of a print and literally caused something that kind of looked like a rip about 2 millimeters high where that bubble started because the material just couldn't form to anything after that. It was just an issue. So I think everything just kept ripping upwards. Eventually corrected itself towards the top, but it did cause a partial fail, and it did cause an issue with that one. Interestingly enough, it did not actually leave any material on the FEP, and although I did clean out the vats and stuff like that, there was nothing to actually clean out. That was the most frustrating part. But it does, I have had weird things happen sometimes. So there are fluid dynamics at play. So you got a little bit of chaos there. There's your work that you're putting into it, your support work at play. And, you know, there's your quality of your resin. That's got stuff to do with it. I've actually done an episode covering the different qualities of resin and how they can either improve or make your print worse. Depending on what you're using. So yeah, there's a lot of factors involved, but it starts with a good support. So again, for those of you that are new, you're just starting out 3D printing, the auto support button seems really easy because you can just click it and then throw them on your printer. If you're having success with that, great. Carry on. If you like using pre-supported files that sometimes fail and you can't really understand why, carry on. But if you want to continue learning more about this and more about supporting models like this, keep watching our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell because I'm going to be doing a full series of episodes on the Fully Supported series, and we're going to cover almost every type of thing you might want to print. Well, almost. Yeah. And it should be a lot of fun going over all this with you guys. As long as you don't mind listening to me talk for, I don't know, hours probably. I'm just kidding. We're going to try and actually cut down some of the episodes in length so they're not all as long as this one. But again, as the introduction episode for this series, I felt it was necessary to really make sure we got into all the little details and covered everything we could on this particular build. So that is it for me, guys. I am going to leave you with this, and you can watch the rest of the slice with the audio that we've got playing in the background, or you can go ahead and say sayonara, because that's pretty much the end of the lesson. I'm going to duplicate the model a few times, throw about 4 of these on the build plate, and give them a test run. And we'll report back and let you know how they came out as soon as we get a chance to throw them on the printers. Anyway, really appreciate y'all watching. This is a very lengthy episode, and I know sometimes maybe this is something we can do episodically and split these kind of up into different episodes themselves, meaning, you know, this would be 4 episodes in 10-minute chunks. Or if you guys think that this is fine and you like me going into detail like this, let me know in the comments. I can't make more videos unless you tell me how you want me to have them, you know, be made up for you guys. I mean, I really rely on the input from the community to tell me, hey, listen, I would prefer that you do this, or I like the videos when you do them shorter, or, hey, can we learn more about anti-aliasing, or can we talk about shape-based, supporting again? Great. All those things are fantastic, but I need them in the comments, guys. And don't forget to hit that like and the bell notification for more episodes, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks so much for watching.